so good. What's up, honey? Whoa.
Hey YouTube, or the 50 to 100 friends and family who watch our videos. We're doing something a little bit different today. We're going to answer kind of like a Q&A, your questions about our PhD, the length of it, what our projects are on, what type of requirements are of the job. And also we'll go into a little bit about funding, because people also a lot of times ask questions like, how can you afford Switzerland? Do they pay you to do the PhD? And in short, we have scholarships, and we'll go a little bit into that funding. That's your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Do you want me to show them? Do you have a peanut butter and jelly and a sticker on your face? Yeah. So we'll go a bit into that. Oh, that's a lot of peanut butter and jelly all over me. And then we will answer those questions. And also we're gonna go a little, you put peanut butter and jelly in my hair. Also we'll go into a little bit about our budget and like how we budget, because we actually budget 10 to 12 months in advance out of the year. We know exactly to the day how much we have to spend that day. Thank you. So we'll go a bit into how we budget, like how we keep track of our bills. This tree is so big and beautiful. We're just at the park, and I thought I'd try to answer some of your questions related to the PhD. And Penelope's hiding from her dada. He's over there. Where's dada? There is! So to answer the first question, how long is the PhD? The PhD is 4 to 5 years. It often takes 5 years because people have to work and they have to go to archives during the same time, and it's a lot to finish it in 4 years, because the first year is preparatory, where you essentially take courses and you're supposed to develop an area of interest and broaden your topic and prepare for the MPT. The MPT is preliminary thesis defense, and essentially what you do is you prepare your project and you defend it, and once you defend it, you're considered a candidate, a doctoral candidate. Before that, you're kind of considered a doctoral student. In the 4 to 5 years that we are, actually more like 3 years after we do our MPT, our preliminary defense, we also need to go to, people ask like, what do you do in that time? We have to write a lot of research, at least 150 pages or so per year, because you want to have more than less, and you want to be able to cut down. And so then we have to go to archives and collect materials related to our question or research topic. We go to the archives, we collect materials, then we have to know how to collect them, so it usually takes about a week. Then we collect them, and then we have to take scans of them or photos, and then we go home and we interpret that into a historical, make it into a historical narrative, or bring it into our historical narrative as the evidence. We also usually TA, so we teacher's assistant. At some point, usually the 3rd or 4th year, you're a teacher's assistant and you get to prepare workshops and help teach the class and grade papers, and you're paid actually a higher amount for that, so that's nice. You have to attend conferences, and you have to try to get published on your topic, because this is kind of important. Of the 30% of PhDs in history who want to go into academia, only 10% of all PhDs who want to go into academia basically become a tenure track professor. Only 10% of them get into that position. So it's a highly competitive field, and one of the things that makes you competitive or a competitive candidate for this field is that you've published prior to the end of your PhD, and that you also publish in what's something called a postdoctoral fellowship, where you stay at another university after your PhD, after you defend and you're a doctor. You then go to another university and you stay there for about 2 years doing research for them, and you produce something that's publishable by the end of it. And then usually people then start applying for tenure track positions. So that's what we have ahead of us. But also, because we need to publish, I should mention that really, gosh, I don't know. It varies per journal, but 7 to 15% of all applicants for publishing are accepted for publication. And so it's also extremely competitive, and this comes back to one of the misconceptions about professorship. People think you can go, you get your PhD, and then, well, they admit that it's hard to get into a PhD, but once you get in, then you do your PhD, and then you become a professor. But that's actually really far from the truth. It's highly competitive, only 10%, like I said, get in. And this is actually something we've recently come to know. We knew it was competitive, but we didn't realize it this competitive. And so we're up for the challenge, but we're humbled for sure. So another question we often get is, how long do you have to live in Geneva? And that really is dependent on your project, but for Bram and I, we probably are going to have to stay in Geneva for a couple years, because most of our archival materials are located at archives that are located in Geneva or throughout Europe. So that requires us to stay in Geneva for quite some time. We could definitely move back to the US, and we were considering that, but it would be quite costly. And then to have to come back and forth with a child, but also the cost of it, we don't have the finances to be able to just pay for plane tickets round trip to the US all the time to go to the archives, and you have to stay for a week to 2 weeks at a time, so it would be quite costly to do that. So and another question we get is about, like, how do you afford Geneva? Do you have to take out massive loans? So I would consider these just under the umbrella of general PhD funding questions. And I can answer that pretty simply. We can afford Geneva because we can afford Geneva barely, but we get by because Bram and I were both granted full scholarships from the Graduate Institute. And so this includes a monthly income plus tuition waiver for 10, but we're only given this monthly income 10 months out of 12 months of the year, which means we have to make what's already a very measly budget per month last an additional 2 months out of the year, so with a child. So it's pretty hard, but we're managing actually quite well, and we found ways to manage that. And we afford Geneva because we don't go out to eat, we don't buy new clothes really. Penelope takes up most of the any new expenses that we have, like clothing, toys, and stuff like that, is taken by Penelope. Bram and I we haven't really bought anything new for a long time. Maybe once a month we might buy something that's not food or essentially related. So right now what our budget only allows for is rent, insurance, because you have to pay for health insurance here, transportation, food, and then Penelope related costs, diapers. That's all we can actually afford at this point. And so because of that, since there's no extra income, in order to have a savings account, we've supplemented our income with a small amount of student loans that is enough money to pay for a round trip ticket to the US in case of emergency or in case of needing to move back, and 1 month of rent and expenses for 1 month, which isn't even enough, but we just didn't want to take out a lot of student loans, especially because the interest rate's not great. Any interest rate's not great for student loans, so we like to avoid those. And we can't really work while doing the PhD. The only options that we can do are TA-ships or research assistance team, but Switzerland has laws, so we technically can finally start working now. But the law states that for the first, I think it might be 6 months, non-EU students cannot work in Switzerland. So we finally just hit the window where we can get part-time jobs. But that's really not a possibility because we'd have to also pay for childcare, and we'd basically break even with that. So once we have to pay for childcare, I'm not really sure how we'll afford Switzerland. And also related to that is people ask, like, you know, how do you afford to get by if you're only living off of a scholarship? And the answer to that is this: we budget 10, usually 12 months in advance for the year, and we've done this since our master's degree. So basically, after paying for all necessary costs, we know to the day how much money we have. And I'll go into that a little bit more when we get into the house, because it's kind of loud in here. Another question that we often get asked is, how long is the paper you have to write? And it's really funny because I think it comes from a misconception about PhDs, because you actually don't write a paper. It's not a paper that you turn in. You have to write a book. You have to write it's made up of like 6 to 7 papers. And this book needs to be a cohesive book, and it has to answer a historical question that has never been addressed before. So you're supposed to be filling a gap in the literature, essentially. And then you defend it. And a thesis defense is essentially where you go and your supervisors and other academics are there, and they can challenge your research, and you have to defend it sort of like a court hearing. You have to defend your reasons why this is a valid topic and why it's a valid book. And by the end of it, they determine if you are a doctor of your field. And they might recommend that you make more revisions and come back and defend it again. But that's pretty rare to get to the point of defense and have to make more revisions for a new defense. So that's what we have to do at the end. Also related to our funding is the fact that because we have such a strict budget, we budget everything out. We figure out all the cost of everything, including diapers per month. Diapers per month, baby food per month, avocados for Penelope. We go through our receipts and we highlight the cost of all food items, the cost of all clothing items, the cost of new toys, and we calculate on average how much that will cost, and we pick the high average, the highest of the average. And then we create a base budget, and based off of our money per month, we subtract the base budget, and whatever we're left with is our food budget. Then we take the food budget and we actually divide per week how much we can spend down to the day. So pretty much every day we know that we have exactly a certain amount that we can spend. And if we go above that, then the next day we have to spend less. And we do that every single day. We've done that every single day. And we've actually been able to save some money doing that. We figured out ways to cut money. And it's just a realistic way to say, hey, I only have this much to spend today. If I go over it tomorrow, I need to subtract that much. And we keep track of it like very intensely. Bram does all of the receipts. He adds up how much we spent per week. If we went over, then we take money out from the next week. And we stay pretty on top of it. Another thing that we do to keep track of all of our bills is to do a bill chart. And we have it for a month, April, and then we have every bill, how much they cost and when they're due, and then we check it off when it's paid. These ones I actually need to fill in right now, but those are also paid. So this really helps us stay on top of everything. As you can see, costs are extremely high for rent, way higher than we've had in recent years, but basically we just fill it in and we stay on top of everything, and it's also an easy way for us to keep track of things. Thank you. Are you showing them? So that's one way that we also budget. But I hope that this answered some of your questions that you have about us living in Switzerland and doing our PhD here, and I hope it was useful for some of you. The next video we're going to do is sort of related to our budgeting, and we're going to take you shopping with us, and you can see the super expensive price of food here, like $14 for 2 chicken breasts expensive. and we'll show you how we do food budgeting and how we save money eating and how we budget our food. So anyway, thanks for joining me today. Bye!